ask you a question?
The Bolton Ink Effect.
Hello folks, and welcome back to the Bolton Ink Effect podcast, where I'm joined by my partner, my wife Bridgette. I'm Louis, and we're discussing all things about entrepreneurship, relationship, and starting over in a new country, and just some of our journey. Welcome.
Thank you. So today, Louis, I'd actually like to delve deeper into something that we've both played out quite a lot in our lives, and that's reinventing ourselves.
Yeah, that's a big topic.
Yeah, and I don't think that one sets out to do so.
No.
I've certainly never had that conscious thought where I go, this is an opportunity to reinvent myself. I think that an opportunity arises, and I then fill that space, whether it means gaining more knowledge, meeting different people, setting different objectives for myself, and then suddenly you realize, I've just kind of reinvented myself a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, just some context to where we got to with this conversation is you and I were actually upstairs figuring out what we were going to say, and eventually we both looked at each other and we thought we should be recording this because all those gems are coming out. And how it started with how we got there was when we moved over here to New Zealand and immigrated. I said to myself it was an opportunity to reinvent myself. Now, what does that actually mean? Because essentially I'm still Louis, I'm just, slightly older and wiser and grayer. But I thought to myself, I was saying goodbye to old relationships, a career that I'd built up there, friendships, and going as far away from South Africa, 12,500 kilometers or whatever it is, to a new land. I thought, okay, cool, here's an opportunity for me with a blank slate to go, what does that look like? What could I possibly do? Reality bites sometimes. And as you earlier said, when you are faced with something, you have to lock yourself or learn new ways, new cultures, new ways of being. And I think the journey that you and I have been on certainly lends itself to growth and resilience, if I can put it that way.
Yeah, one doesn't actually. Immigration is definitely a podcast that we're going to have in its own right. Correct. Because I think that there's a lot to be said for it. I think that one is potentially largely unprepared for what awaits you on the other side, despite the fact that we came over, we had a look at things, and we decided that there was this enormous opportunity for us. Yeah. But landing here.
Well, in practice, I thought we were going to land here and be able to do what we did in South Africa.
And that couldn't have been further from the truth.
Like a million miles.
Yeah, black and white, day and night. So your first job, when we arrived here, you were told that your job no longer existed.
Correct.
So from a legal standpoint,
we were illegal.
We were illegal. Yep. Kenzie couldn't go to school. We couldn't, if anything had happened, we couldn't have gone to a doctor. And I remember our immigration lady at the time saying something like this had never happened to her before. So we were really all in uncharted waters.
Surreal.
Yeah, and so when you say reinvent yourself, perhaps looking back, you put your walking shoes on and you literally hit the streets and you phoned up every contact you could, and that resulted in you getting a job with somebody, I guess, who largely saw an advantage for himself, and he may also have taken pity on you. But I just think about who you were in South Africa.
Yeah.
And who you were with them, and you were this very small person sitting in a very small office, grinding the hours away.
I've always said to you, B, people and places and situations get put in front of you so that you can learn and grow. Mm-hmm. And that was certainly one of them. And looking back on it now, I'm grateful for it because it happened. Yeah. And I can regret it and I can feel the different emotions about it. And at a certain time, there were some very strong emotions about it. But it definitely taught me the importance of, number one, relationship with you. That was key. And two, that I am more capable than I realize. I've always lived somewhat in the shadow of myself, where I've achieved a lot of things, and just like most people have achieved a lot of things, but I've always have kind of felt what else could I do? What is my full potential? And walking that part, literally walking the road down here and where we stay, and knocking on the doors and feeling that smallness and that frustration, but it was a means to an end. It would get through. When I was in it, I can only explain to it felt like a bit of a prison. And you can't really see the wood for the trees or know that it's actually going to come to an end. You just have to do the time. You have to do the reps. You have to put your head down, take a deep breath, and get through it. And I remember at the time, I was having a chat to one of my long-term friends, and he was just saying, yeah, get up, show up, rinse and repeat. And I was like, it was like a mantra for me. It was like, just get up, show up, rinse and repeat. And it helped me a lot just to realize that every day was different, but every day was the same. But I just had to do what I had to do. And I mean, you at the same time went through a reinvention process, because I know that you felt quite strongly about how we wanted to raise Kenzie.
Yeah, that's why I don't actually even think that it was reinventing. Ultimately, I very much identified as Miss 13's mom.
100%.
That really was my purpose on this planet, and maybe that's as a result of the fact that we had Kenzie quite late in our lives, but she, that was who I was here to be, her mum first and foremost, and we were always quite clear about the kind of open-minded education we wanted to provide Kenzie with.
Based on the beginnings of her
absolutely, which was amazing, and still stands her in good stead, I believe.
Correct.
But that's not how things worked out, and I can tell you there were some very, very dark days of thinking that, well, once we'd swapped visas, and I then got a full-time job. So I was working in town, and Kenzie would be dropped off at school in the morning, and I didn't really see her again until 5:30 or 6 that night. I can't remember where you were, but you were working, and so Kenzie had to go to an after-school centre, like an aftercare place, and that just was.
Well, that wasn't for a very long time, but at the time.
It was still a couple of years.
Yeah, sure.
Intermittently, a couple of years for a couple of days a week, and that was very tough. And I don't think anybody ever fully understood the level of how that affected me.
I don't think we had the opportunity to actually explore it. We didn't at the time.
No, and in hindsight, it doesn't really matter. She is who she is. We're who we are. We've come on this journey. We've learned some resilience, and this is where we find ourselves.
But looking back at that now, sitting here, chatting on the podcast and talking to me about it, how does that make you feel in terms of how far we've come and where we've got to? Or should I say, and what would you say to other folks that are maybe just going through this journey as well?
Yeah, I think if we see it under the core theme of reinventing yourself, it's going to happen. When you change countries, you are not who you were when you left, whether it's America or India or South Africa. Your personality is still you, your language is still you, your habits are still you, but you landed yourself in a very, very different place. And I often likened it to being around a pond. There's an ecosystem. Everything around that pond has learned to exist, and suddenly in comes this weed, and the pond just doesn't quite know how to adjust. So you're not part of the ecosystem for a long time until you pay your dues. And in our case, it's been 5 or 6 years. Yeah. We're now part of an ecosystem. We now know everybody around us. We wave at people down at the park. We can phone somebody if we need help. We have a doctor and a homeopath. We have a chiropractor and a physio. We have a network. We've now become. I am familiar with this pond.
It reminds me of the story of you and I, going through those early days. And in the early days, I can't remember who we spoke to, but I remember them saying it takes 5 years.
It was probably somebody we bumped into at the park.
Yeah, it takes 5 years, and at the time, that just seemed like an eternity.
That was an eternity.
And we used to walk. There's a local park that we walked where we were so very, very fortunate. And we've walked hundreds and hundreds of kilometers there. But one of the earliest memories I have is that we were having a good bitch and moan about life and the unfairness of life and where we were and everything like that. And we both stopped and we looked across the estuary at the mount and we kind of just realized, hey, stop. It paused and gave us a little bit of perspective. I remember we both, I can't remember whether it was you or me, but we literally just said, come on, let's just pick up our big girl panties now and take one step in front of the other and just let's do this. And it changed something for us both because we realized this is where we're at. We can either let it break us or we can let it make us. And that's what we did. We let it make us.
I think in addition to that, in hindsight, there has always been gratitude. That's played a very crucial part in getting us through the very dark times, and there really have been some very dark times. And being able to shine a light of our families are safe, our friends are safe, we're safe, we have a roof over our head, there's always a bit of money in the bank, there's always petrol in the car, there's always some food in the pantry. We've never been out on the street, we've never had anything catastrophic come into our lives. And so that perspective of gratitude.
Where does that come from for you? And because that almost leads to there's almost a blind faith.
I guess that's just the person that I am. My glass is always half full. I don't, and I cannot see it any other way. My glass is half full. There is always an opportunity. There's always the sun. The sun will always come up. And that's and only once, for a period of time here, did I lose that perspective completely, and that I have to say was probably the closest I've ever come to thinking I can't live anymore. It was so dark and so felt like such a prison that there were definitely some nights where I wondered how I could do it.
Do you want to explore that a little bit more?
No, I don't really think I need to. I'm not skilled enough to be able to talk myself out of that.
Okay, so just for the listeners out there, so this had a specific thing just to do with a job, an actual it was a visa fulfillment that you had to do. Just for some context, that's it. We don't have to go.
Yeah, I think that it was definitely as a result of. I suppose the broader picture, in hindsight, very quickly, is that having come from managing our own business together, being very much in our own routine, in a space and place that we felt at home in, with a network and with friends, and it's something as small as you and I worked in our home office. We both had Macs. We worked on Macs. I hadn't worked on a Windows machine for 10 years. Yeah. We didn't have a central server that we saved stuff to. Coming over, starting a new job, I suddenly had to remember how to use Windows and OneDrive and SharePoint. And the shock must have registered on my face because, all that takes a little bit of getting used to.
Sure.
But if you don't know that somebody doesn't know that, like, why would you think somebody doesn't know that? But
sure.
I'd completely forgotten all about that, living, working from home. And so, and I guess in hindsight, that must have made people think, oh my God, is this chick a buffoon?
Okay.
And so there was definitely moments where I was possibly battling to show my value, and swimming in the sea, the shark very quickly made himself apparent, and I found, while trying to stay, I don't know how to explain it. While trying to keep my head above water.
Yeah, you were almost living a dual life. Like you couldn't actually do the job because you were actually trying to fight off this shark, or just being able to do the job.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Which led to growth, resilience.
Absolutely, 100%. And once again, in hindsight, how enormously grateful I am for the lessons that were taught to me. But yeah, there was a time where gratitude was not the overarching sense.
What got you through it?
I think it was probably just time, to be fair. One day after the other, just marching that march.
It's an interesting concept, this whole time thing, because related to patience. I know that the journey that you and I have been on this last 6 odd years, there's our time, and then there's the universe's time. Whether you believe in God or Buddha or the universe or whatever the case is, and it's something that's highlighted for me all the time, because you want it now, or there's something that you have to get. You want to get residency, you want to get permanent residency, you want to get citizenship, and unfortunately you just have to kind of take a back seat and view this journey and let time do its thing in its own pace.
Very much so. Yeah, and yeah, time really does what it needs to do.
Yeah.
And in those moments, if any of these processes had been rushed,
Well, you can't rush them, can you?
the lessons wouldn't have been learned.
Correct. Yeah. Look, there's some lessons I didn't want to learn, but I had to learn them, and you've alluded to that as well. Where are you now in terms of reinventing yourself? And if we go back to that theme of like what that actually means, I mean, I've seen you grow, I've seen you blossom, I've seen you mature. I said to you the other day, the person that I look at in the mirror, yes, is grey-haired and wrinkled, but I certainly don't feel that what I look at. And I know that there's been progression and growth. How do you feel about it?
Wow, that's a big question that could be answered in many ways. So I feel now that I've got to the point where I'm okay with the fact that I am 50. I'm okay with the fact that I'm experiencing menopause, that Miss 13 is moving in her own rhythm, in her own way, and that means that I can step back into being who I am. That's a lesson I teach myself every day.
Okay.
I'm not here for her anymore. I'm just there as a safety net when something happens, if she's not well, and that's wonderful, actually.
Sure, it's a big one, that.
Yeah, but she's really at the point where she's figured out that she is no longer, she has her own view. She doesn't have to share ours anymore. She's her own person. She's not part of us anymore. And the quicker we can let her go into that expanse of freedom and hold her hand when she needs it, the better off for everybody. Because you just keep knocking yourself parenting. You keep knocking yourself against a wall. And we are older parents of a single child, and so the term helicopter parenting does pop into my mind.
But we're aware of that. We've said that.
Yeah.
We know we are, because that's it, and we're aware of it, and we know when we need to pull back and when we need to be there. And yeah, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that.
Yeah. So I guess back to your question around reinventing. It's not actually reinventing. It's stepping into. It's becoming used to certain things. So I was a little bit shy about having turned 50. I felt that I was older than most other parents. I felt that I was older than everyone in my team. When I was still
when you were employed.
Correct. And now I'm completely okay with that.
What changed? Is there a specific moment? Is there a specific thing? Or
maybe I'm a coward, but it's just not having my nose rubbed in it every day. I'm now here, I'm with you, you're great, I'm not great, you got a few more wrinkles than me, even better, thanks for that.
Nice. Okay. All right, so...
And also, I've got a lot of experience. So what it takes somebody 8 hours to do, I could probably do in 2.
Correct.
And I'm okay with that now. Yeah. I don't need to spend 40 hours trying to prove my value, my worth, and my competence.
No, and you said it last week, where the different routine that we're in now, the freedom that we've given ourselves, to give ourselves a bit of a runway because we've worked so hard for that, has allowed you to, dare I say it, reinvent yourself again, to go, there's a new routine that I can get into, because you don't have to prove yourself. And when you work, you work. And when you don't work, you can go do other stuff.
And I think you might be right. I think it is actually about reinventing. I think you're right, because I have to unschool and I have to unlearn,
100%.
which means that I have to
And I've watched
relearn
you.
and reinvent. So it's okay to go to gym at 9 in the morning,
Exactly. You don't have to go at 6 o'clock.
but I still look out the window when I see people driving to work at 7:15, and there's definitely a clinch in my stomach, a bit of guilt, saying,
that also speaks to habit.
I should be out there.
You're breaking a habit because
Yeah.
you had to.
Yeah.
You were in an enforced habit because you did it time and time and time again for so long. So to undo that and fill it with other more appropriate, more life-affirming habits is the natural way forward.
Yeah.
And it's a process.
If you could give yourself some advice now, knowing what you know, to the Louis who arrived here 6 and a bit years ago, what would you say to yourself?
There's a few things. One would be to not be so afraid, not to be so fearful.
But what are you afraid of, Louis? Because that theme comes up often for you. What is it that you're afraid of? What's the feeling behind that?
It's a great question, and I wish I could answer it succinctly on the podcast.
The thought that's very first on your mind.
I don't know what my true potential is.
So when will you know?
Good question.
And how will you know?
I'm kind of doing it now.
Yeah.
And how will I know? I'm going to put a pin in that.
Okay.
Because I really don't have an answer that will justify.
No, that's all good. That's all good.
You know what I mean?
Okay, so let's go back to the question that I asked you. What advice would you give yourself who immigrated here 6 and a bit years ago?
To be more gentle with oneself. Okay. So know that things are going to take time. It's going to take time to build a network. It's going to take time to find out where things are. I mean, there's a pretty obvious sayings, but it's going to take time. Sometimes things happen quicker than other things, but you can't necessarily plan too far in advance until you've gone these little steps, you know. The one thing I would say was, is networking and building that network slightly quicker would have been helpful, and trying different things. But because of the process that we were in terms of the visa requirements that we had to do, it didn't necessarily allow me to explore other avenues. Now I feel like I can explore other avenues, which I'm doing, which is great. But the one thing top of mind would just be a little bit more gentle with yourself. It's going to be okay. There's going to be times where you're not going to get out of bed, where you're going to, just lie there and just go, the woe is me. But the internal work, that knowing that what I did is just like, and the gratitude of getting up, showing up, rinsing and repeating. And that rinsing and repeating doesn't necessarily have to be the same thing every day. But it's just knowing that, like you said earlier, the sun's going to come up, and be appreciative of where we are in New Zealand. That we're blessed to be in this. I think that would be the biggest thing that I would say. And, just give it a go. Just get stuck in and give it a go, because the system is built for you to give it a go. And I'm realizing that more and more as we go along this journey. And yourself? I mean, I could put the question back to you. What would the one piece of advice?
I would like to tell myself back then that it was going to be shit hard. Actually, that's the one thing I would like to tell myself.
Yeah.
And if you preface that to everything, it means that you expect things to be rough. So when they slap you, you're not as taken aback as I was on some of the things that occurred.
Okay.
Yeah, it's hard. Immigration is hard.
Yeah, it's a hard thing to hear you say that. But I understand.
Yeah.
I understand the metaphor, for lack of a better word, what you're actually meaning.
Yeah. So the only advice that I would give to myself is expect things to be challenging, because they will challenge you. Things you don't even think will challenge you. And so just ride them out. Just ride them out.
Okay.
And know that you will survive it. That sounds very doomsday, and I don't mean it to be.
But
there are some things over the last 6 years that I cannot put a rosy glow on.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
no, I get that. But listening to you talk about that aspect, have you had mentors or people that have helped you along this journey, or someone or something that has pulled you through?
I think
Other than me, of course.
I think you, Kenz, and my mom are the things that have pulled me through. So my mom has been a constant thing. She's been this rock solid voice all the time. My mother knew from the time we left South Africa that we were going to be successful. She had this vision long ago. She articulated it a number of times over the years. So
We just didn't hear it, did we?
I heard it, and sometimes I would scoff at it because it would be so far from what I was experiencing in that moment.
Because we were in it.
But thank God she kept that dream and that faith alive for us.
She's held that space.
Very much, and she's held the dream for us. Showing up every day for Kenz, and obviously showing up for you. And you know, there have been times where I've fallen and you've been stronger, and vice versa. And there have been so many wonderful moments along the way.
Correct.
So many. So immigration is definitely not all plastered with doom and gloom. You know, there've been hikes and walks and waterfalls and beaches and secret coves and friends that we've made and places we've gone to and laughs that we've had and picnics, and I mean, we live in the Bay of Plenty. The name says it all.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to touch on one more thing about reinvention in terms of, we know the journey that we have both been on. Where do you see yourself going if you could hold a vision going forward? What would that look like for the reinvention of Bridgette Bolton?
So two thoughts. A thought came to me this morning, which I'm going to share second. So please remind me if I wind my way too far away from it. The first thing is, the vision that I have is that you and I are going to be successful at this. In whatever form our experience, our knowledge takes us. Because we both have a lifetime of that. And I love to help people. I love to help people. There is nothing nicer than seeing a job well done. And I know that that's true for you too.
100%.
So, you know, as a marketer and a communicator and a strategist, somebody who's learned the tips and tricks of digital and social media, and for you, somebody who has so many years of experience in filming and broadcasting and podcasting and editing, you know, I think we're a good match. And so in my mind, I see what we're going to do as a successful business. I really do. However, and that was the second thought, and that was a thought that I had this morning, we will have learned nothing if in 5 years we're still doing exactly the same.
Correct.
So what I mean is, and I don't mean, you know, with AI, because we're bringing that into our business. So obviously that is going to take a major part of what we do and a lot of the slog away from us. What I mean is, if we are still the people who are doing it every day, if we haven't enabled other people to come in and for us
reinvented ourselves.
Yes, as people who manage the business rather than have to be stuck in it every day, because then we won't have learned anything.
I love that.
Yeah.
Okay. So the vision is being better than the version of ourselves now.
Yeah.
With incorporating everything that we're learning along the way, even at this age. Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I think it's a great opportunity for us to kind of put all those experiences and that authenticity in terms of the journey that we've been on and bring it to the fore in you know, forums like this and share the journey.
Yeah, and just another thought, and I became aware of this, all this, you know, all these months of visualizing, is that I've never, ever, and this is probably something that's going to drive our financial advisor insane, but I've never actually looked at the financial goal. I've always felt the emotional upliftment and the emotional payoff and the emotional triumph of doing a job well done, because that's all I want to do. But
Yeah, I get that.
ultimately, I'm going to charge the going rate. And so ultimately, I know that there will always be money in the bank.
Yeah,
I
so
just
the-
know
so
that.
the
I haven't
financial
even.
goal is not it.
It's definitely not it.
Gotcha.
And so maybe that's a thing of coming into your 50s.
Yeah.
It's a whole lot more about fulfillment.
For me, it's about stepping into that power, just not giving a fuck about what anyone else thinks. To be fair, that's really where I feel like it's our time now.
Yeah,
It's
agreed.
our time. Last question, and then we'll wrap this one up. The last couple of weeks, anything that stood out for you that you've read, something that's piqued your interest, something that's really just kind of like gone, I need to remember this, I'm going to take this on board.
Oh, Louis, I read so much. And everything. I wish I had the secretary that kept popping around my head, opening the tabs that say, this is today's lesson, or blah, blah, blah. So what am I reading at the moment? Quantum Success, which I keep going back to, which I'm really enjoying. Shakti Gawain's The Power of Visualization. Creative Visualization is on my Kindle, which I'm really also enjoying. It might be too old-fashioned, but hey, I'm diving into it every now and then.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and then there's a little fictional thing I'm reading about kids who lived in a cult.
There we go. We'll just leave kids in a cult and
No,
move
so
on.
what are you reading?
The one thing that I don't read, as you know. I'm not a reader, but I have started listening to a lot of podcasts, but audiobooks. And one that popped up, which I'm busy listening to now, is The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer, and I'm finding it quite enlightening and heavy going because I'm finding it quite confrontational. Dare I say it? Just being able to let go and being the observer, of my mind, and getting over that kind of fear that we live with, I live with every day. So it's an ongoing process, but I'm really enjoying it and getting stuck into that.
Because his overarching thought is what's behind it.
What's behind it?
Yeah.
And being
what's behind that feeling? What's behind that emotion?
being the experience.
Go back, yeah.
Being the witness to what you're experiencing. Like who is this? I am just the experiencer of this emotion, this situation, and it's wonderful. I'm going through a lot of learning and a lot of introspection.
And as a final thought, adding to that, if you do see it as just Louis experiencing life on planet Earth right now, and nothing is actually so serious, it allows you to not take everything so seriously.
It's a bit of space.
But it's also just a game.
Let go. Have fun.
Just love people, do what you can.
Yeah. Like I'm doing now.
Yeah, leave the place better for it. Yeah, and just be chill. Just be a chill guy, man.
Just be chill. Love it. See you next time.
Sweet. Nice job, Louis.
Can I ask you a question?